Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
I was watching this clip from Peyton and Eli of Peyton talking about what a bad play caller, in his opinion, is like. Here's the clip.
Show me the bad way.
All right, bad way. We got dice left, 19 slant, 54 blunt. Check with me. Alert, scat left, 93. All right, if that strong safety's down, get to the check, all right?
I got it. Let's go dice left.
Hey, if that will is blitzing, though, hey, you got to check to the pass, all right?
Yeah, I got it. Here we go. Dice left, 19
Hey, watch your blitz zero. Watch your blitz
shut
zero
up.
also.
I got it. Dice left, 19 slant, 54 blunt.
Oh, hurry up. Call the play.
Stop
Delay
talking.
the game. So you don't like that.
Now, the reason I want to talk about that clip, and I bring that clip up, is I have seen clips like that, right? When you watch mic'd up segments, which I'm not going to clip in this video because the NFL is brutal about content ID stuff. So, but there is a famous clip of Matt Stafford trying to get the play call and Sean McVay is talking in his ears. And what it brings to light to me is that there are different types of play callers in the NFL, guys who will give their quarterback a lot of information, a lot of coaching notes before letting the player put the play call in and actually run it. And then there are guys who are more hands-off in the way that I think Peyton would prefer, and why he categorizes this as bad play calling is because he is Peyton Manning. He don't need all that shit. Right? Just give Peyton the play, he gonna be good, right? But there is use in that other style, right? Kyle Shanahan is somebody who is notoriously hands-on. Same way with Sean McVay, our example earlier. These are successful coaches who have been able to have consistent quarterback play. So there is some merit to doing it that way. It's just different quarterbacks will succeed or fail with that approach, on top of many other things going on with them in that current system. But the reason I wanted to talk about this was because it made me wonder, how does Kevin Stefanski interact with the play call with his quarterbacks? Is he a overcoacher? Because one of the big questions of this offseason and one of the big questions of this season is, what exactly is the value of Kevin Stefanski to the quarterback position, and how do you get the most out the quarterback position with Kevin Stefanski? Because unlike any other coach that the Browns have had, we have evidence that Kevin can be beneficial to quarterbacks. Hard evidence. We've seen Joe Flacco look good with him. We saw Jacoby Brissett look really good with him. We saw Kirk Cousins in Minnesota look good with with not Kirk Cousins, but obviously Kevin Stefanski. We also have evidence of it not going so well with Kevin, right? DTR, I would say, I imagine, looked worse than what he was. Deshaun Watson, he was awful. And then Baker Mayfield, who had a really good year with Kevin Stefanski and a really bad year with Kevin Stefanski, albeit, some people blame that on the shoulder. I think there was more going on during that season. But the question pops up in my head, hey, is this part of the problem? Is Kevin Stefanski an overcoacher, undercoacher, and how can that really affect what's going on with the quarterback position? And I'll give you my theory on that question based on reading that clip, because I think people are going to read into it and think that Kevin's an overcoacher because Peyton Manning said that that's bad, and some people don't think Kevin's a good coach, so they're going to go automatically Kevin's doing the bad thing. Or if you're a Kevin supporter, you're going to do the opposite of it and say Kevin's doing the opposite thing because you want to have your image of Kevin being the best or worst, depending on what your agenda is that you're bringing into this conversation. I want to think about this from a more objective point of view. Is Kevin Stefanski an overcoacher, or is he somebody who is pretty lax on the headset? Obviously, none of us have the green dot for the Cleveland Browns. We don't know what it is, and maybe Kevin or one of the quarterbacks can illuminate this. But my theory, based on a lot of different bits and pieces of evidence, is I absolutely do not believe Kevin is a overcoacher in the headset. I think there is too much evidence that points to the opposite being true. The first piece of evidence for my argument that I want to submit to you all is this. Look at the quarterbacks Kevin has had success with versus the quarterbacks that Kevin has not had success with, right? First year with Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins, Jacoby Brissett, Joe Flacco. Those are the guys that he's had success with. The bulk of those guys, Kirk Cousins, Jacoby Brissett, Joe Flacco, not guys you need to be in the headset long with, right? Kirk Cousins, pretty experienced quarterback. You're not going to have to tell him, watch out for this. If we get this look, watch out for that. You don't have to micromanage Kirk Cousins. That's the whole point of getting Kirk Cousins. Jacoby Brissett, another guy that you don't have to micromanage. That's the whole point of Jacoby Brissett. Joe Flacco, 100% a guy you don't have to micromanage. But these other guys have had a history of being with or used to more involved offensive coordinators, right? Baker Mayfield is a prime example of this. His offensive coordinator has always been important to his success, whether it be college, whether it be the NFL. Not to say that Baker's not capable of having success on his own merits, obviously not the case, but Baker is somebody I think who does benefit from a coach being in the headset more than not. I think that's part of the reason we saw the disparity from Baker Mayfield's first year in Cleveland to Baker Mayfield's second year with Kevin Stefanski, right? Which is Kevin probably in that first year, because it was their first time working together, was more hand-holdy on the headset. And this on top of many other things. Obviously, Baker had the injury too in 2021. But on top of other things, I think that benefited Baker Mayfield that first year. And then the next year, Baker's in the second year of this offense, and Kevin's expecting him to be able to do more of that work so he can have his attention focused elsewhere. And that is part of why I think things kind of broke down between them. And then you look at when he's had success back in Tampa Bay, right? Because he had the unsuccessful stint with the Carolina Panthers. I don't know what kind of system Matt Rule runs, but it did. I mean, Matt Rule's just not good. So he could have been doing any approach. There might have been many other problems there in Carolina. But then Baker had success with Sean McVay, Los Angeles Rams, a notorious overcoacher, right? Like that tracks, right? And he goes to Tampa Bay and works with very hands-on offensive coordinators in Tampa Bay. Liam Cohn, super hands-on, right? That's why he's in Jacksonville. I think there's a case to be made that, Baker is one of the quarterbacks that do benefit from getting all of those checks and things and reminders before the line of scrimmage. And I just want to put this out here real quick. I don't think the distinction between whether a quarterback needs those reminders at the line of scrimmage or does not need those reminders on the line of scrimmage is an effective way to measure whether a quarterback has limitations as a player, right? This is not meant as a way to categorize players based on skill, because Joe Flacco does not need that stuff, but he's not a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield, right? So this is just a way of like, hey, how does this quarterback get success? How do you find success with this quarterback? It's more about the strategy than trying to figure out if somebody is good or not, right? Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I think the most used adjective of him on the field is overwhelmed. It always looked like Dorian Thompson-Robinson was overwhelmed when he played for the Cleveland Browns. I remember people making the point, and I think it was an accurate point, when the Browns threw him out there against Baltimore. Anytime the Browns put out Dorian Thompson-Robinson, it felt like the Browns were just like, hey, figure it out. And part of that, I think, is kind of true. I think Kevin's going to get on the headset, tell you the play call, and trust that you know what to look out for because they taught it during the week or they taught it all offseason. And he's not going to hold your hand. He's not going to give you those reminders. He's just going to want you to get the play call in and focus on the protections and do the right moves. And that always seemed like a big problem for Dorian Thompson-Robinson, right? The nuts and bolts stuff and then executing on the nuts and bolts stuff. Very much a big problem for him. And if you look at his history, he spent 4 years with Chip Kelly. Very hands-on. Okay, let's continue to follow this thread here, right? Who is the other notorious quarterback that Kevin Stefanski has not had success with, that the Stefanski offense did not seem to benefit in any way, shape, or form? Deshaun Watson. Now, I have talked about this before. Deshaun Watson is a much more inexperienced quarterback than I think people understand, right? Because by the time he got to Cleveland, he had only played 3.5 seasons of football. It feels like it's been much longer because he had injuries and he sat out a year and he was in his 6th year by the time he came to Cleveland. But if we're talking about level of experience, he was very inexperienced. He was still within the realm of what you would expect for a quarterback in a rookie contract when he came into Cleveland. Also, what came out about Deshaun in Houston, which is he needed a more structured offense to be successful, right? He needed to be reminded of certain things pre-snap. He needed to be reminded of certain looks to check for line of scrimmage. And then if you look at Deshaun Watson's failures in Cleveland and why he didn't look successful or good in Cleveland, it's because there was a lot of indecision. There was a lot of bad protections the Cleveland Browns were in while Deshaun was there. And it makes me think that that's somebody who probably needed a more hands-on approach. Now, just because Kevin prefers it to be one way versus the other does not hand wash Kevin of any blame of this. The fact is, if Deshaun Watson's your quarterback, you just got to get used to that's how he needs to do things, and you need to adjust as the coach, right? So it's not saying, oh, well, these quarterbacks just don't work out for Kevin, so that's all we can do. No, Kevin's expected to improve. Kevin's expected to adjust the same way quarterbacks are expected to meet him halfway. But if we look at what is the wheelhouse for Kevin, what are the quarterbacks that Kevin Stefanski has success with, these are the quarterbacks where he can just give the play call and they understand or retain the information during the week that they need to at the line of scrimmage to be able to make the plays that they want to. That's how it kind of breaks out there, right? If you look at these players, their experience, what we've heard about these players and what these players prefer and need, and it seems like some of these quarterbacks needed a more hands-on approach, and Kevin is not going to be the most hands-on coordinator, which is fine. And then some of these quarterbacks don't need that hands-on approach, actually thrive without that hands-on approach and succeed when they don't have that hands-on approach, and why they look better. It's about getting the most out the quarterback position. And in order to get the most out the quarterback position, you have to thoroughly understand the type of environment that you're going to throw that quarterback into. And I think this is a vital piece of it. It's not the only piece. It's not the only thing that you could do. And it's something that can be adjusted and Kevin can get better at, but it is a piece that does matter. And I think you can see why that piece matters and that they've identified that by looking at this quarterback room. Joe Flacco. We already talked about it, right? Kevin knows, okay, if at the end of the day in this quarterback competition, I know I can give that guy the play call, he can run it. I don't have to do all that extra on the headset. So that is why Joe Flacco is here. If somebody else exceeds what Joe Flacco can do, then Joe Flacco will be gone. But until somebody does that, that's the guy, he's the emergency brake, right? Like if all hell breaks loose, I know that that's going to stop the car, right? Joe Flacco's going to stop the slide. I could put him out there. Cool. Kenny Pickett. Now, Kevin has mentioned that he's a fast processor, a great student, a great retainer of information. So maybe he has identified that Kenny Pickett is somebody who can do this if you ask him to do it. And I don't know how Pittsburgh's system was ran. I don't know what kind of offensive coordinator on the headset Arthur Smith is. I don't pay that close attention to Pittsburgh like I do Cleveland. So I can't speak on what the relationship was like there. But maybe Kevin has identified Kenny Pickett as somebody who would benefit more from a more hands-off approach. And then there's Dillon Gabriel. And the reason I think the Browns are so attracted to Dillon Gabriel is because of this preference, right? If it is true, what some people speculate, which is that Kevin Stefanski wanted Dillon Gabriel, then this is a huge part of why, right? How Kevin prefers his quarterbacks to be able to operate his offense. Dillon Gabriel is not a young quarterback. Well, he's a young quarterback, but he's not an inexperienced college quarterback. He's one of the most experienced college quarterbacks in that entire draft class. played 5 years of starting quality, high-level college football, FBS football, and then he played really good in all 5 of those years. Went to 3 different offenses. It's debatable because some of these offenses don't really have that much different in between them, but I promise you the jargon was probably different. The terminology probably changed at each stop because that's usually what happens when offensive coordinators switch schools or coaches switch schools. So he's learned different offenses. I argue how important that part is, but I bet what's come up with Dylan is that he is somebody who retains that information. One of the things that you can tell from watching Dylan's tape is that he very rarely makes the catastrophic mistake. And how do you make the catastrophic mistake in football? Oh, I didn't see that safety over the middle. Oh, I didn't account for this or that. I didn't know that if this happened, I had to check to this in the play. That's not a problem Dillon Gabriel has. I bet Dillon Gabriel got great coachability grades from all of these pre-draft guys because it's obvious in his tape that this is a very coachable player. And I think that's a huge part of why the Browns are so excited to bring in Dillon Gabriel, despite the fact that he's not prototypical size or possesses any elite tools, because they feel like he is the most coachable prospect in that class and somebody that you can trust. If you give the play call to, they're going to retain all the information to know that they got to check to this or watch out for that, those kind of things. You don't have to do that over the headset with him, and then he can thrive with the extra freedom that's been given to him. And to be fair, if you look at the last 2 quarterbacks that have come out the Dan Lanning system, Justin Herbert and Bo Nix, these are 2 quarterbacks who thrived with that kind of freedom on offense. So I think they're making a strategic bet here that maybe Dillon can thrive with that kind of freedom on offense. We'll see. College experience to me is a completely different ballgame than NFL experience. I kind of don't count it, but we'll see if they are correct on that, because I think that's the bet that they're making with Dillon Gabriel and why that pick makes so much sense to them. It also might explain why every time people ask why Shedeur isn't getting first team reps, despite looking pretty good in OTA drills on video, you're always getting hit back with the vague statement of there are some things that Shedeur is not excelling at behind the scenes, right? Some version of that. Now, whether that is true, the validity of these things, it's all taken with the huge pinch of salt, or take it with a huge grain of salt, my bad. I wouldn't take anything that we're hearing from like anonymous sources at this point of the offseason as gospel, right? Like, it might be the case that Shedeur is doing excellent with all of this stuff, but it would make sense that the Browns would be more hesitant, or at least Kevin Stefanski would be more hesitant about throwing in a rookie that has less experience, that is younger, like Shedeur, because he knows that his offense tends to not work as well with quarterbacks that he has to hold the hand of more. And he knows that Shedeur Sanders is probably going to be more, or he might feel that Shedeur Sanders might be a more in that line of quarterbacks you have to hold their hand at the beginning of their career than like a Dillon Gabriel, right? And why there might be some hesitancy to throw him out there, and why they might just wait until they don't feel that's the case for Shedeur to play Shedeur, which might be later on in the season. I think it's interesting how just a small little nugget like that, if you really evaluate it, you really look at it, can start to break open some bigger cracks and show you to some bigger trends of what the Browns quarterback room looks like, what they prefer, and why it is that they might prefer it. Not saying it's the only piece to that puzzle, but it does make the room a little bit more easy to understand when you look at it from that perspective, because everything that I can see from the outside looking in tells me that Kevin's probably less of a hand holder for his quarterbacks, and that can be very successful for quarterbacks, right? Peyton Manning said that's how he prefers it. Like, Peyton Manning would probably love playing with Kevin Stefanski. The question I have overall with Kevin is there a young quarterback in this college game that we can get our hands on that benefits from the way that Kevin wants to develop quarterbacks? That's a huge question mark. I don't know the answer to that. Can Kevin adjust how he develops quarterbacks enough to be able to develop one to get to where he wants them to be? That's another huge question we have. Because I have no doubt if you plopped a real franchise quarterback in here, like let's say, who's one of the smarter, Joe Burrow. Let's say you plop Joe Burrow with the Cleveland Browns. I think Kevin Stefanski would be amazing with Joe Burrow. No doubt in my mind. If the Browns fired Kevin Stefanski and the Bengals hired him, I think the Bengals would be a really, really, really good offense for a long time, even if they didn't retain Jamar Chase with Kevin. Because I think Kevin's style is pretty adjacent to somebody who's a franchise quarterback who really doesn't need all that extra, needs the control and needs the freedom to grow like Joe Burrow. I keep saying Joe Burrow. And that's all good when you have the quarterback. But the real question is, hey, can Kevin develop him? Can Kevin get somebody to that point? And I think that's why this year is important, right? I think that's why how Shedeur looks by the end of the year is important, because I think Kevin needs to demonstrate, hey, I have adjusted my style enough to where if I have to hold the quarterback's hand a little bit, I'm able to make that adjustment and get that quarterback to where I need him to be a lot better than I did with Baker Mayfield in 2020 and 2021. A lot better than he did with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Lessons had to have been learned from those two experiences, Deshaun Watson especially. And I think that's going to be critical for Kevin, because no doubt in my mind, he's a good coach. The question is he the right coach for the Cleveland Browns at this moment when they desperately need to develop a quarterback? Because remember, we hired Kevin when we already had a quarterback, or at least thought we did. And he was pretty good for that moment. And then they tried to upgrade the quarterback. Now we're in chaos. So let's really think about it. And that's how I really think about Kevin's evaluation this year. Is I want to really take a good look at that, because that's where I have the biggest question marks with him. But y'all let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.